All right, guys, welcome back here to CEVO Learns, a non-traditional podcast where we take a look at basic concepts in playing for newer players or moderate-level players that want to brush up on specific concepts. Today we are focusing on gameplay between Literally Gaming and Columbia Co. This is a live game, and we're just going to go ahead and try to use it to focus down what they're doing, breaking it down a little more in-depth than a traditional sort of play-by-play podcast or broadcast would do. My name is Gorgon the Wonder Cow. I'm a caster here at CEVO, as well as with Join Dota and a series of other organizations, and editor-in-chief at High Ground TV. And I'm joined by the first Panda and Hyasiance from Vasavi Gaming.
Hello. Just here to give some insight, my opinions, share it with you guys. Maybe you can take it and use what you learn into your own games.
And Haya?
Hi, I'm Haya, and what she said works.
All right. So I want you guys to talk a little bit about the draft while I'm doing a couple of adjustments here on my end. Just kind of, walk me through it. Tell me what you're seeing, what you like, what you don't like.
Well, I think Columbia Co. from the last game saw that they don't want literally gaming to grab the Death Prophet again. It just causes so much problems for trying to defend your towers, your base, and she just, if it goes too late, she does get tanky, and it could really make or break a team fight. And vice versa for Literally Gaming, doesn't look like they want their enemy team grabbing that Shadow Shaman. His Hex and his Shackles are really great disables, and they can easily take an early advantage with that hero.
Literally Gaming, once again, focusing very heavily on the push. Razor is going to come out with the Shadow Shaman. Razor's ultimate is going to impact towers once Razor gets into Ganums, which is almost certainly the build he's going to go for.
Absolutely.
But I do notice that Literally Gaming is putting a little more emphasis on grabbing some agility, presumably a semi-farming agility rather than an offlaner. I think that's smart.
From what we can see now, it looks like Columbia Company is going to go a little bit more team fight heavy, since they've probably figured that Literally Gaming was going to go for the push, especially with that Shadow Shaman coming out really early. So I guess we'll see how it goes down.
That's a great counter. Having solid team fight is a great counter to people who are against people who are going to be sticking together a lot, trying to push towers down. So
yeah, walk me through that a little bit. Like, break that down. Why is that so strong? Because I agree with you. I think one of the strong counters to a very heavy push lineup is getting a really good 4-man defensive squad.
Well, if you get a team fight heavy strat, I believe you're going to have levels over the people that are sticking together and trying to push down as quickly as possible. Also, it just gives them the opportunity to kill the pushing team, because usually they're more squishy, they don't have as much lockdown, they're really focused on one thing. Whereas having a Tide Hunter, he could go in, disable everyone. They have the DP once she's level 6 with the Tide Hunter ult is just ridiculous. Viper can clean up people. He doesn't even need that much damage items with his poison, and it's just it's dangerous combo.
Yeah,
I mean, the team fight just gives you that, that fight back.
Yeah, if you are expecting your opponent to do a push strategy, then you are... Remember what I was saying at the end of the last game? That Literally Gaming was waiting for a moment where they would offer a fight that Columbia would take. A push strategy is basically a series of offered fights. So Literally Gaming can say, at every tower, they're saying with their hero positioning, Columbia, we're offering you a moment to engage on us because we want your tower. And you can either take this time to do something else and give us the tower for free. We'll take that piggy bank, no problem, all the way to the bank. Or you can try to team fight us right now. That's our offer. And then Columbia has a moment to kind of counter offer and say, all right, well, we're going to push your tower if you push our tower, so you can fight us here, and that's our offer. And it's sort of like a trade. That's why you hear trading all the time as a concept. The Tide Hunter is really good because Literally Gaming is going to very frequently, if they get a push lineup, send 4 or 5 of their heroes in an offer and say, we are offering a 5-hero engagement at this location. Do you accept? And if you have a Tide Hunter, or specifically a Tide Hunter Sand King combo, Columbia can very easily say, yeah, we accept, because we know that we have a very strong advantage moment, initiation potential, in 5 4-man engagement. So every time Literally Gaming offers that, Columbia has a response. And Literally Gaming is going to be forced to offer that if they want to do an early game push strategy.
Going Syllabear again.
Yeah, the Syllabear is... It will work a lot better with the Razor alongside it. The Lone Druid just wasn't enough to, especially out of the off lane, to make it happen last game. He does carry very hard because he goes 12 slotted instead of 6 slotted, because he has an entire another unit that has an inventory as well. And granted, the bear doesn't get stats or anything like that, but it does get effects. So you can put auras down on it. You can put unique item modifiers down on it. So things like the Desolator can go on it, the Basher can go on it, the Assault Cuirass can go on it, the Vlads can go on it, the Maelstrom can go on it, or the Mjolnir. Anything that has item effects basically they're great on the bear, and they help the bear increase damage output. While the Lone Druid can just kind of stat up and also get like a Basher on the bear and a Basher on the Lone Druid with the Entangle is a recipe for permabash. If you can get that far in the game, it's very difficult for any single hero to handle Literally Gaming. Who's flicking their mic? Stop that. So Columbia picks up the Jakiro.
Yes. More push. Again.
Yeah.
The nice thing about Jakiro push is you can start early because you don't need mana.
Yeah, Jakiro push is going to be out of that liquid fire, which impacts buildings as well, and is AoE. So if you don't have to be quite within range of the building to drop it, you can kind of drop it on a nearby creep. The one problem with the Jakiro push is that Jakiro doesn't have a lot of potential to split push, because he doesn't have an escape. He's very squishy. He's a support, and you won't see him ratting. What's that?
It's so slow.
Yeah. He's very difficult to use in escape maneuvers. So Jakiro is sort of a hero who's going to kind of push alongside his team. Viper can kind of split push a little bit more, specifically because he's probably going to go in for the mechanism this game. Death Prophet can even split push a little bit, specifically late game once she gets up a Bloodstone and maybe a Heart or something, and the souls continuously heal her as well. Makes it very difficult to take down a Death Prophet. As we saw last game, Death Prophet goes into late game harder than almost any other intelligence hero. Some of the only ones that I can think of off the top of my head that go late to a similar degree as the Death Prophet would be like the Darkseer, who turns opponent's strength against them. But for most intelligence heroes, or most heroes who are dependent on big casts, they do tend to fall off in the late game.
I already like Colombian Co's draft. Just like last draft, I preferred Colombian Co's.
Ooh.
They have a really nice mixture of team fight and push that I favor.
If I'm Columbia, I'm thinking it's worth scouting Roshan early with this draft. Lone Druid has the bear to soak up a lot of Roshan's damage, and Ursa can get out there and get enough of those Fury swipes, which do stack on Roshan, while the bear is soaking up the damage to make it happen. Along with the stun, the long shackles that come out of Shadow Shaman, they Literally Gaming could potentially make that happen if they wanted to. So that's something that Columbia needs to watch out for. I would expect them to at least send somebody smoked up to drop a ward by Roche really early, just to be sure. If not, scout that side of the that side of the map with all 5.
Yeah, it's definitely like a level 1 Roche kind of a
right. They are going to immediately grab some smoke for both teams, and we'll see what they end up deciding to do. Taking a look.
All smokes. Oh my goodness.
All right. Ursa's not moving, and if they wanted to do this, they would have done this right away. So they're not, presumably, they would have done this right away. And they probably wouldn't have sent the Shadow Shaman top, so they aren't going to move for that Roshan attempt. It is very risky. It gives you a fair amount of advantage, but not as much of an advantage that a lot of people think. It gives you a level advantage, 2.5 to 0, basically, 2.5 to 1. But in terms of overall, like an early game Roshan does not mean like, oh my god, my team just won. Which a lot of people think, like, the early game is determined by a successful early game Roshan. That advantage is very nice, but it is still, the early game is very execution-based. Here we go. Some warding coming up from LG. No warding. This is heavy smoking into their own jungle. They expected LG to scout, I think. They are watching Roshan, as you can see. I'm going to switch over to their vision specifically. They're watching just to see if anybody comes down. They're also watching this rune. They're not watching the far wall, So I don't think they're that worried about it, but they just want to see if there's any like flurry of activity. And this will also give them vision, like I said, of this rune, which is going to spawn in 7 seconds. The rune actually spawns at 0.01 instead of 0.00. Just a little bit of whatever. And the rune is top. Nobody knows what it... Well, actually, Dire Side knows what it is because they've got vision with that ward. Presumably, somebody's going to go up there and grab that. Taking a look at the lanes. What do you guys like? What don't you like? You want to illustrate some concepts for us?
I guess I don't really have much to say right now. All I can say is LG. I don't really like how their heroes will be working together. They don't have as much synergy as Columbia Co. I find, and I don't know. We'll have to see. They'll have to really outplay and watch out for their timings.
I would say all their carries synergize well with their supports, but their carries don't necessarily synergize super well with each other. The Ursa's gonna, if the Ursa gets his hands on somebody, which is the goal, he's gonna blow them up too quickly for the Razor to steal a lot of damage.
Yeah.
That's part of the issue. In that is that the Razor can't really focus down the person that Ursa's moving on. So I mean, you don't want everybody to have to focus on the same person. So it is good for literally gaming that they are able to focus on different people, but it's not great that one of the big advantages of the team fight, Miko literally can't get from the person that Ursa moves on. So if that's the only person who's within shot range, Razor is going to be a lot more impotent during the fight until things get mixed up a little bit. They do have a lot of synergy because the Razor is going to have lots of lockdown available from his team in order to steal damage. The Lone Druid is going to have those entangles to help out the Ursa and help out the Razor. And I can't believe that Miko actually got that first blood, but he did do it. Yeah, the synergy is just a little less actionable, I would say. I think it's there, but it's not like... It's not as blatant as, oh, we're going to have Tide and Void and Enigma, and we're just going to chain all these spells together.
Wombo combo.
Yeah, there's a little bit more RDM to it, and there's a little bit less, like, overarching theme. But I think they go together fairly well. They do all push towers really well, except the Rubik, which is a big part of this.
I mean, but the thing about Rubik is, yeah, he may not push towers well now, but if he hits 6 and steals Exorcism, well...
Yeah, if he steals 6 and hits Exorcism, if he steals a Ravage for a counterfight, and also he gives a lot of counter push power because Fade Bolt reduces the overall attack damage that you're going to have coming out of a team. The Fade Bolt drops the damage by 14, 20, 26, or 32, depending on its level for heroes, and that means that if you are being pushed up against, which it does look like LG is going to be focusing pretty heavily on push through the mid game, that Fade Bolt can be pretty effective at preserving towers. The other thing that the Rubik is really good for is getting that null field up to get rid of some of the damage that output in the late game coming out of the Jakiro and the Sand King. It will help those heroes to drop off a little bit more quickly, giving LG a late game advantage, which I do think LG has a pretty notable late game advantage just based out of the draft. Yeah. I don't think this is like last game where, depending on execution, it could really go either way in terms of late game. If this goes to 60 minutes, literally gaming feels a lot more comfortable unless they're just so far behind that they're guaranteed a loss because they can't catch up.
Yeah, and I think one of the things they did was that they've gotten rid of Tide, like they killed Tide already really early, which is good because Tide tends to get really tanky in the offlane really quickly. Yeah. And because they've been able to do that, now they can rotate their supports around mid.
For anybody who watches my cast frequently, I talk about the Tide Radiant Dire differences a lot, so I'm not going to focus on it too heavily, but just for anybody who is kind of new here, well, let's focus on this Tide because he's rotated and he might be going down here again. He's going to be telekinesis up, and there we go. Another scare. Very nice.
Second time. Yeah. Second time he's been caught out, and it's just weird that he's not from the offlane. He should have been playing a lot more passively, especially against Shadow Shaman as a support for an Ursa, because Ursa can stack that damage really quickly while you're being hexed or shackled.
Yeah, he is going to be very far behind his Blink Dagger timing at this point. And this is we can go right into the reason why Tidehunter is better on Radiant, or better on Dire than Radiant. On Radiant, Tidehunter has his offlane, and then he has rotations. He does not have the ability to come over to this camp and stack it very effectively, and then knock it down. And Tidehunter can impact ancient camps with his Anchor Smash. On the Dire side, if if his lane pushes out, he can stay right around this safety zone. Really, for the Dire side, it's more like this safety zone. But either way, he can stay pretty close to his tower if he wants to. And every minute while his lane is pushed out, he can come in and stack up this camp, then come back out. He loses minimal experience, and he also has a healthy stack to get in and catch up in gold later on, and experience. Which means that his Blink Dagger timing is very reliable on Dire side and very unreliable on the Radiant side. And that Blink Dagger is really important if you're going to be aggressive with the Tidehunter. I mean,
that's their biggest initiation for the team fight.
Right. It's really their... I mean, the Sand King can initiate as well. But
if Tide initiates, then Sand King is likely going to be able to get in there with his ult instead of having it canceled as he's blinking in.
Right. 100% true. You usually are going to want to be able to get the Sand King the opportunity to get in safely and make sure that he actually has the right amount of heroes around him. If the Sand King initiates and then the Tidehunter comes in, it's just not stacking up the spells quite as efficiently and not doing quite as much damage during them. And also the Sand King has the potential to be attacked down during his ulti if they're not stunned while he's doing it. Which will make it much easier for them to evade that ultimate's effects once it's stable.
Dire's already blocking the ancient camp.
Yeah, they opened up with it basically. That went down at maybe about 3.5 or 4 minutes. Go ahead and talk about why that's important.
Well, like you said earlier, if Tide's having a bad time, he tried earlier to come and stack this camp, and he got caught out again by the Razor and Rubik and Shadow Shaman. So, I guess that's the biggest point. They really need those ancients to come back if they get behind.
Yeah, and we do see some additional stacking presumably coming up here for the Tidehunter, and they won't stack because
they won't stack.
This box comes out basically like that. This is one of the few boxes in the game that actually literally seems to follow the direction that it's in, which means that ward is well within it. There is a unit in it because sentry wards count as units for creep respawn, and in addition, if LG send anybody up this way within the next minute or so, they'll counterward this fresh observer as well because the vision is there. All right, taking a look at and meanwhile Sand King is just knocking down camps. Unfortunate for mud golems, but Jakiro is basically just spending most of his time making camps weak and stacking them. He's going to be down a little bit in terms of experience, but he's hoping that that's going to pay off in his team's efficacy. He is sitting at level 4, so he is managing to get some levels. The Bear's going to go down here. That's going to be 300 gold, which is more gold than the Jakiro actually gave off. But the Bear doesn't go down! Wow, Bear actually gets resummoned as well. That's a big loss for Ko. Yeah, and unlike last game, where Ko kind of started off a little bit weaker, LG started to get some towers, but Ko really had the opportunity to get themselves into a stronger late game. I don't really know that Literally Gaming is going to be... It's going to be much harder for Literally Gaming to give Ko that later mid-game advantage, because once the Ursa and the Lone Druid and the Razor come into their own, they're going to be basically 3 members up. That Razor getting the mechanism that I called out already, that's a pretty quick time for a mechanism, sitting up at less than 8 minutes and 30 seconds. One of the reasons why you get that mechanism is for the general push advantage. It does free up your supports as well, and it gives you plenty of armor for defense against physical damage attacks. Since the Razor has Unstable Current, which is his third spell, or his third skill, it's a passive that kind of deters your opponents from casting magic on you, targeting you with damage. DPS is the best way to knock a Razor down, but it's very difficult to do that against a Razor with a mech because he's going to have that additional 5 armor. And in addition, he's going to be able to steal your damage over time as well with the static link. Once the Razor gets a mechanism up, in a lot of cases, it's going to take 2 or more heroes to take him down. It's very difficult to solo down a Razor at that point.
He's surprisingly tanky.
Yeah.
As a primarily support player, I love it when I have a Razor that goes mech. Yep. It's so nice. It's like a treat.
We'll probably see this. We'll probably see the same sort of build, and once again, Hero just getting a little bit out of play. I think that was a warding Rubik who got caught out because there's... Yeah, that was a warding Rubik. Radiant already had a ward up, so they saw him go over that way. And that's how he got caught out. And that's one of the reasons why when you're warding, it pays off to counter ward. At least then you know if your opponents know where you are. Even if you don't get the ward out, you know whether or not you need to back up right away.
It was weird that he didn't try to smoke in before he went up there.
Yeah, I think these teams are kind of at the level of play where they don't utilize smoke for warding quite as much. For better or for worse. There are advantages and disadvantages to that, right? If you're not using smoke for warding, then you still have those smokes to move in aggressively. But if you're not using the smokes at all, the cost of 100 is not that significant, all things considered. Invisibility rune is going to be popped, and Razor's going to come down here to defend this tower. The Viper, by the way, for the same reason that the Razor goes for the mechanism, is also going for the mechanism. I said that, I think, before I checked his inventory, but we have verified it now. He is going into that mechanism. He has the Corrosive Skin, which gives him a ton of magic resistance, which once again means that attacking with damage per second, the right clicks, is a little bit easier than trying to nuke him down. And right clicks are most heavily affected by armor. That's the best way to offset right clicks. He doesn't have his mechanism up yet, though, which means that he doesn't have that armor boost, he doesn't have the chainmail in his inventory, and he also doesn't have the ability to give himself that surge of health, and is pretty easily taken down by the Razor.
I was worried for a second that Razor was going to overextend. I thought Viper was going to get too far back, because I didn't think Rubik was going to get in position, but it ended up working out okay.
Yeah, there's no Ags yet on the Razor, and we're still quite a ways off of the Ags, of about 3,000. So this ultimate that he had won't roll into the tower damage, but it's still pretty good for pushing, because it will passively attack creeps while you focus the tower. But taking that creep wave out sooner and making it so that there's not as much of a creep reaction. There is going to be a mass TP to defend this tower. This is a pretty good TP reaction. They got to the tower well before it's within deny range. And important to think about when you're TP reacting is whether or not you're going to get there right as the tower is about to get into deny range or well outside. If you get there once the tower hits deny range, great, you can deny the tower. If you get there well before, like 200 health before tower gets within deny range, then the tower still has enough health that you can still TP react to it if they aggress on it again. But if you get there just as it's outside of deny range, that's a terrible time to TP react. You're not going to be able to deny the tower, and your opponents are going to be able to come up and just backdoor it, basically. Take it out anytime before you're able to TP react. That is a bad time to TP react.
And maybe even pick you off at the same time.
Yeah. This tower, fortunately for LG, they did have a dual aggression thing going on. They might have been able to just get a tower if they'd grouped up, but they have gotten 2 towers very low. They're not that dependent on the gold advantage right now because they're not losing a lot of engagements. So getting that tower super quickly is not necessary for them. Remember, they've got a strong mid and late game. So getting those towers in super strong pushes at like the 12-minute mark isn't really on the docket for them. So long as they're able to keep up in towers, they can feel like they're probably trading off even, or trading off ahead. Because their team comp does better running even than Ko's does. Ko kind of wants to be ahead of the match.
I really liked LG's rotations on the Viper. That's exactly what they needed to be doing, because Viper is really their only right-click damage. Keep him down, then it's going to be really hard for them if this game does go late.
Yeah, Ursa is going to be able to knock down this Roshan with just the Mask of Madness, probably. Though Roshan's getting a lot of ashes on him. Yeah, there we go. Mask of Madness is a unique modifier, and it did not used to until very recently. It did not stack with Furry Swipes, but now it does. So you can actually see Ursa come out very, very early and knock down that Roshan.
Yeah, it's much earlier than before the patch with that. It's incredible how fast some people have been able to get it down.
Yeah. You definitely have to have warding up, and this is not sufficient warding for Roshan because, as you can see, it doesn't really give any Roshan entry ward, especially if you are Radiant side. The Dire side can just walk in. If you think that your opponents are going to go in for Roshan, you really do need a ward somewhere in this area. Ideally, this one or one right here. If you have a ward over here, the vision that it'll give you usually means that most units can walk right around the edge without a smoke and still just be outside of vision. So you really want to be very careful about what your warding habits are if you think that your opponents are going to be going for Roshan. And now Ursa's just going to try to come in and knock down this tower. He's actually trying to fend them off. He's got the Aegis, so he's not scared at all. He's being very aggressive, and he knows his team is going to back him up and try to grab some kills here on the back end.
They'll be able to get that tower down and then still be able to go in.
The Ravage working out very well, though, and the Ursa not being backed up as much as I think he expected.
Yeah. The nice thing is that they already had a bunch of wards in place, so they can safely chase into there and know what they're kind of coming up against.
Ursa's coming in. There are a lot of people very low, but Ursa he gets kited. Against multiple heroes, actually, we can see that happening right now. Look at him try to grab somebody. This is exactly what we mean by kiting. That's a textbook example. Kiting is where your opponents are pulling you around as though by a string. Like you are a kite, and they are just jumping you back and forth. You cannot get a hold of anybody. It's basically the opposite of pickling, where two opponents are trying to get at you and they're just kind of whittling you down. It's like running you back and forth. And the kiting can be very, very effective against heroes like Ursa, heroes like Lifestealer. Alchemist is another one. Any basically melee heroes who like to right-click and burst damage out. They are very susceptible to trying to kill multiple heroes who are mobile. And we just saw how effective that can be, especially with the quick blink off the Sand King.
They really need to be, for next Rosh, they really need to be periodically checking, at least with like a smoke together, to see if they can pick off the Ursa, because that's something that they really need. They can pick off the Ursa, and then maybe Rosh will be low, and then they can easily take it really quickly before the enemy team has time.
The counter warding priority from both of these teams is much heavier this game than it was last game, and Shadow Shaman will, if he gets vision up here, which Shadow Shaman doesn't have a spell that gives vision, but he can have an ally stand up here and look down. Unfortunately, he can't. This is one of the problems with counter warding by yourself as a support. To counter ward, your opponents implicitly are going to know where you are, and if you're a support and you're squishy, you're a pretty prime target. Ursa's going to come down here now, and once again, he's thinking about running in, actually, which would probably... He doesn't have an Aegis this time. That would not be ideal. Stolen Ice Path. That's a pretty good spell to steal. One of the reasons that this is actually a better spell on Rubik than it is on Jakiro. Because Rubik casts it instantly. He doesn't have the cast time.
Exactly.
That's ridiculous.
So that's a really strong stun, and the offset of it, like the way that the developers had made that stun less good, is by making it very difficult to line up. But you can see how fast it shoots out from a Rubik. So by all measures, that's a semi-broken stun on the Rubik, because he just shoots it out. He can hold everybody in a line. He can also make basically impassable terrain. You don't have to lead at all. There's none of this molasses Dota that you have to deal with as a Jakiro.
Molasses Dota.
I like that term. It makes me happy, because that is one of the things that I played Shakiro in a scrim match last night, and he's so frustratingly, like, his cast time is so slow.
You did a great job.
Well, thank you, but his cast time is ridiculous.
Yeah, he is a hero that, especially his turn rate as well, and that's something a lot of lower play, like, turn rate doesn't exist in LoL, I don't think. In a lot of MOBAs, turn rate doesn't exist. All heroes turn at the same rate, but that's not the case in Dota. Some heroes turn at different rates than others, and more importantly, turn rates can be modified by some heroes like the Bat Rider, whose sticky napalm significantly changes the turn rate to make it lower. Turn rate is really important if you are going to try to run, or if especially you're going to try to force staff. A Bat Rider is really good, for example, at minimizing the efficacy of a force staff as an escape. So you get some sticky napalms out, and the rate of turn, so that you can actually turn in the direction that you want to force staff, is minimized. CEO is doing a really good job through this mid game, but they're getting themselves into some danger here. They're going to go and pop the Death Prophet ult, and they're still going to be aggressed on by the Lone Druid. And I mean, literally gaming, they need to be careful. Running, they cannot chase onto the high ground. They realize that. They back out. They really probably should feel pretty comfortable letting this tower go. The Lone Druid's going to run out by himself, followed by the Ursa. The tower goes down, but it is denied. So that's a pretty nice deny. Heat of the moment. The Rubik stays back to make sure that he gets that deny. But remember what I was saying. They need to be careful ingressing into this. That Death Prophet ulti running the way that it was. Nice disjoint by the Sand King.
Gosh,
that was really great.
Invisibility, that invisibility will disjoint auto attacks, and that's exactly what we just saw there. So a little hint for anybody who's thinking about playing Sand King. You can disjoint a fair number of stuff with that invisibility. And make it so that you have just that little extra edge of survivability.
Perfect timing for them to back off. I was going to say, they better not be thinking of continuing.
I believe in this time in the game,
right.
it's like, don't be greedy.
We have some question from the chat from Dubschemo, a sub here at the CEVO channel, a regular. He is asking, what are some of the most kiteable heroes, and what are some of the best heroes for kiting? The kiting, that procedure I was talking about earlier, where you use multiple heroes or just really fast heroes to try and keep your opponent from actually being able to catch up to anybody. Any opinions?
I mean, obviously, characters with blinks like Anti-Mage and Queen of Pain are going to be able to, kite people a little bit more effectively. Even Death Prophet, because with her ability where she starts moving very quickly, if you throw in like a Yule Scepter, she can be, you can almost never catch her. And if she's got her ult up and, you think she's running low and you chase after her, that could be bad news.
Yeah. Amanda or Panda, do you have any additions to
that? Let's see. Heroes that are great for being fog ninjas, so good for kiting. I would have to say Venomancer. He is really great at kiting people. You drop down one of your wards, it slows the people that are chasing you. You go into the fog, you pop out, you poison people, you throw a gale. It's ridiculously annoying. So, then there's Marana too.
I want to point out something here. The Ursa is going for, it looks like a BKB, which is a standard build on most heroes who get kited. BKB is usually considered a must-have because a lot of the kiting abilities, a lot of the ways that you get kited that you both have mentioned are spells that you would cast on somebody, like either a Cyclone Staff or a Poisonous Gale or some sort of a negative move speed buff. Those only add to kiting until your opponent get the BKB, and then you no longer have the advantage that those have. So if you are going up against a hero who you want to kite, that you know is going to get a fast BKB, like you just figure there's not a lot you're going to be able to do about it, at that point, who do you think about drafting? Do you have any ideas? The Marana is a good call already. The heroes that have Blink is a good call. What a Ravage. Great play off this Jakiro. This is going to be a team wipe, probably.
The follow-up was great, too. Oh, my goodness. I'm loving this Sand King, by the way.
Yeah, he's been playing very well. Lone Druid is going to trade off that wipe for a Tier 2 tower, but they're going to lose the Tier 2 tower because of it as well.
And that's I think this Tier 2 tower on the Dire side is a little more important than...
It's much more important.
Yeah.
It's their, Rosh response.
It's their last Rosh response. Every other tower that they could use to respond to Roshan with teleports have gone down. Meanwhile, this tower is a response to this tower down here. Like, you TP to it when it's under attack. Maybe if you want to smoke into your opponent's jungle, you can TP to it, but you usually come out through the mid if you're going to do that anyway, because you have just more. It's easier for your heroes to get there without TPing. So, some heroes that are really good at kiting are Centaur and Darkseer. Keep those in mind, Centaur and Darkseer, because the Centaur is going to be able to raise everybody on your team's movement speed, which means that any pair of two heroes can all of a sudden be kiting machines. Darkseer has the Surge, so you can land on any hero on your team that's nearby and get them away from trouble.
What's his name? It's going to bug me. Slardar. That's another one.
Slardar.
Yeah.
Slardar's pretty good at kiting. One of the issues with Slardar is that while he's kiting, he takes more damage. And so you can run into trouble with that. But yeah, he does increase his own movement speed. And because of that, it can help out with the kiting as well.
How could we forget Slark?
Is Slark.
Slark honestly isn't much of a kiter. Well, so much as he is just you can't touch him. Because kiting is different from being untouchable, right? Kiting is where your opponents think they can touch you. They try to touch you, and every time they come in, you slap their hand away. Or every time they come in, you take a jump back, and then they move on to a different opponent. So Slark, because the way that he works, if he's visible, people are going to try to lock him down. And that's all right, but he doesn't have a huge amount of movement speed. He's got the pounce to get away, sort of, but like that's not a super kiting move. And then when he shadow dances, he's invisible. You can't make him visible, so people just ignore him and move on other heroes. For kiting heroes, you really want heroes that look like succulent targets, but aren't. And that's the key to kiting.
Trying to think of more. Can't really off the top of my head.
Yeah, I think we talked about it enough at this point. The Roshan, once again, going to literally gaming. Ko, this is the stage in the game where Ko should have an advantage. And they have been executing very strongly. If they're going to win this game, it's going to be coming out of their gameplay from like right now. They have all of their blink daggers and everything up. They have had it up for a little while. They've got enough towers down that they can take map control. The Viper is coming into his own. The Death Prophet is coming into his own. The Jakiro's just about hit his peak for the game. He'll probably hit his peak within the next 10 minutes. The Sand King also getting close to the peak. Once he has level 3 ultimate and he has his Veil of Discord, he'll also hit his peak. So Ko is rolling into they need to take a big advantage now time. And you can tell that they know it by the fact that they're positioning so aggressively. They know that they need to force some engagements that are favorable and catch LG off guard.
I really feel like the Jakiro or just maybe even the Crovolus, Rod of Atos would really help in this game, I think. You don't really see it often. Oh, there's a big thing going on mid.
Yeah, I mean, LG is trying to force Ko off the aggressive. They're trying to make sure that Ko is constantly having to react. And by doing so, take away their window. Basically say, during the entire window that you have a big advantage, we're going to force engagements that aren't the engagements that you want. Unfortunately, anytime that they group up as 5, that's the engagement that Ko wants. And we can see that right here. Like, Ko doing very strong through this engagement. And LG just pushed that a little too hard. They thought that they were going to go in and grab a tower. And Rubik is going to go down as well. They really, really, really should have just pushed the creeps up and tried to force TP reactions, and at that point backed out. They shouldn't have dropped the wards, and they shouldn't have tried to move in on that tower. Because, once again, Ko has windowed. And this is a phrase that I use a lot. As nomenclature, I'm going to draw on the map a little bit to explain this. But teams have different stages of the game. If this is time, right, and this is power over your opponent, relative. Teams have different stages in the game where they're going to be doing well. So for LG, their time versus power is probably going to come out something like this. And for Ko, it's probably, and this is all execution based, it tends to shift, but if you're just looking at the draft, you would guess it would do something like that. For Ko, it's probably going to do something like this. And right now, the windows that I talk about are windows of opportunity. There are the moments where you are at your strongest relative to your opponents, where you have an advantage. Ko has an advantage right now. They have windowed. And Literally Gaming keeps moving into their window, trying to climb through. Even though they have the Aegis, they're still going to lose the Aegis. They get the Jakiro here, which is not that big of a grab. If they grab the Death Prophet, that'll be very nice for them. But Death Prophet is, once again, doing that little kite procedure. She will be locked down by the Lone Druid, which is very nice. But, I mean, in the end, they get 2 kills out of that. That's not the end of the world for Ko. They probably shouldn't have been out as far as they were. Some of the ways, so let's talk about win your opponent's window. What are some of the ways that you can try to make it through that window if you feel like you're going to window after they do? So, for example, Literally Gaming, they've been up against the window for a little while. They're starting to get into their own window. Right around now, between now and 5 minutes from now, they're gonna be windowed out pretty heavily.
I was just thinking to myself as I'm watching LG continuously go into all their ultis and all that team fight. It doesn't seem like they're being really aware of the cooldowns of the enemy team. Like, they're not really paying attention to when the Tide and Sand King and DP have their ultis up. They just seem to be trying to take it at any time they can. Yeah. Which is really dangerous.
That's a really good point. For teams that are going to be having an advantage through the early game, specifically team fight teams, it's really important to keep in mind your opponent's cooldowns. The respawn times are so low through the early game and through most of the mid game that you can go in, lose a fight, but suck out all of your opponents, make all of your opponents use their big spells to have long cooldowns, respawn, and go force another fight before those respawns are back. And Ko is really dependent on having Ravage, Epicenter, Exorcism available to have really strong team fights. And if LG, they die and they take 35 to 40 seconds to respawn, they can go push down a tower at that point. And they can actually win engagements by losing 5 men if they are very aware of their opponent's windows with the ultimate cooldowns. Some of the other ways that you can handle windowing when your opponent's window. Roshan is a big one. If you can take an Aegis, which the Ursa did do, you can make it less desirable for your opponents to try and be aggressive against you while they have their window open. And you can try to buy time until their window closes.
It's that buying time thing I think is really important. If you can't feasibly get a Rosh. Like if you can use your supports to sort of fend off attacks and then, at the same time make your jungle safe so that your carries can get a little bit of farm in that time, then, when you re-engage, you might have another item up that could be helpful.
Right. And just the nature of buying off that time means that if you are a late game team, you are getting closer to your goal. You have to be doing something. You can't just be buying time by waiting in your fountain. But naturally being in the game, unless you're being starved, which is that process that we discussed at excess last game, unless you're just being starved out and bottlenecked, you're just naturally going to be getting gold. There's a big Ravage, so now Ravage is down. LG, probably they want to back out of this engagement, probably don't want to take it. They are going to move in anyway. Ursa's going to BKB up and try to move in. That it's going to not matter. The Jakiro's stunned because of the BKB. And they've lost 2 on LG, but now all the ults are down. A lot of the scary stuff is down. They still have a fair amount of health on some of these heroes.
BKB's down, though, so they can kite him.
Yeah, Mayrock is moving away from Agony. You can see Agony trying to kite. There it is. Successful kite, and yeah. I don't know. But once those ultis went off for Ko, and the damage was done, like I had said in the fight, Literally Gaming had an opportunity to just back out, take minimal losses. If they can force out those, and yeah, they're going to lose that tower as well. And actually the racks too.
Yeah.
Jeez, that's a big loss for Literally Gaming. They are, like I said, they are getting into the point where they should window pretty soon, but they're 10,000 experience in deficit and 5,000 experience or gold in deficit.
I think it just comes down to who's better at executing now.
It does.
I guess that's what it always comes down to.
It's always an execution game, right? But if you're talking about general trends,
yeah.
Yeah, if you're talking about general trends, LG just needs to buy themselves a little bit of time. It's going to be more time because if you're Rax, you need a bigger window to crawl through. Basically, the bigger of a disadvantage you are, consider disadvantage weight. The fatter you are, the harder it is to crawl through a window. The bigger disadvantage, you have, the bigger window you need in order to turn a game. So they're at a pretty big disadvantage, which means they need a pretty big window.
Yeah.
If Ko is able to take a Rax like they just did, and that means that even though Literally Gaming should technically window sometime between about 2 minutes ago to about 4 minutes from now, they should start to become their own. They're too fat to climb through that window, and they need more time. And so they need to buy more time, which gives Ko more time to execute on their window. And it's just as simple as that. Like it's all about trying not to be fat, I guess. Trying to be fit.
They seem to be playing right into Ko's hands, though, this game. And that's unfortunate because their team, I don't know, their team can really take it in late game.
Let's talk about the concept of baiting, because baiting is another big way to wait out windows. And baiting, I mean lots of types of baiting. Let's talk about how baiting helps you get through windows of disadvantage. Haya, go for it.
There's so many different ways you can bait. Like you can, a courier, and getting one person to sort of come forward and get a pick off using a courier is important. Letting a support kind of go down the lane and farm and look like they're alone, stand back, and engage as soon as as long as you have vision to know that you're not going in on a full 5-man, then you can use that to your advantage.
There we go. That was a pretty nice pickoff. They are going to get hit by the Ravage, though, and then the Epicenter. They're not quite big enough for this to be damage that they're going to roll off. And they're going to have to try to back out. They're not backing out, though. Once again, Razor's just hanging around and trying to kite, which is... He dodges the stun, but this is not a very good... Wow.
Yeah.
They're missing him, but it doesn't matter. Like, he doesn't... That Razor should have just backed out. Dodged the stun and backed out. And he didn't. Now they're going to lose everybody, and this is GG.
The Fabulous really did well to just pop her ulti and just run right through them out of their range, but still close enough so that her ghost would still attack. I really liked that.
So I just want to close on the concept of baiting, because there are a lot of other ways of baiting other than baiting a hero. You can also trying to bait out or force out your opponents to do ultimates, right? Yeah. So what was not being done by Dire side. Literally Gaming never baited out ultimates. They forced ultimates and then fought through them. If they can force the ultimates and then back out, even if it costs them 1 or 2 heroes as bait, they can spend 1 or 2 heroes as worms on a hook to get the advantage of knowing their opponents don't have ultimates for a while. As then they can force an engagement where they don't have to bait, where they know they have a positive engagement. Another thing that they can do is smoke up and try to bait an engagement by taking a gank. Taking a gank, but making sure that it is a gank where once you get the kill, his allies are nearby enough that his allies are going to try to come in and support him. And then you can take a 5-on-4 engagement. That's another way. That's a very difficult way to gank, though, because it can, or a difficult way to bait, because it can kind of turn on you. Either way, guys, thanks for tuning in. This is kind of an experimental sort of program that we're doing. We've gotten really positive feedback from last week. Hopefully we'll continue to get some feedback from this week, and you guys will continue to come back and ask questions in the chat if you have questions that you want us to talk about. My name is Gorgon the Wonder Cow. You can catch me casting all over the world at GotCowDota on Twitter. You can find updates there. And I'm joined by Vasa V's, Haya, and the First Panda.
I'm Hyasiance. You can follow me on Twitter at Hyasiance, and the Vasa V Ladies Dota 2 team on Facebook as well, and Vasa V Gaming just in general.
Hi, I'm the First Panda. I have one little tidbit to add to a baiting thing. There's one of my favorite things to do is if you already have vision on a spot and you see an enemy team ward that spot, I like to leave the ward there so that they don't know that we know it's there, so that we can kind of set up team fights to our advantage.
Yeah, you should always check how long that ward has left, though. If it's a fresh ward, it is just worth it to knock it down and not give them the vision. Usually, that is a very nuanced thing that you need to be very careful about how you use it, because even if you know the ward is there, it can give them some bit of advantage to have it there. So some wards are worth keeping up if you know that they're there, so that you can know exactly where your opponents have vision, and so that they don't come counter ward you, or so that they don't see you. They don't feel like you know where they see, and you can move around it. But at the same time, they won't see you if you never move into that spot. They also won't see you if you kill the ward. So either way, it's about giving them a false sense of security, which in some games is really good, specifically if a gank-heavy team. But in some games is really bad, specifically if you have a big like team fighty sort of team. You usually just want to get rid of the vision.
Of course, it's all situational, but if you can do that and use it to your advantage, it's great. I like doing it. Yeah, so I'm the First Panda. You can find me at Dota2TFP on Twitter. You can check out Vasa V's gaming community. Check out the ladies team. Thank you for joining us.
VasaVGaming.us, I think, is the website with the forums and everything.
All right, guys. Well, that's all we got for you this week on CEVO Learns. VODs of this will be up if you want to go back and revisit it, or if you want to revisit some of the casts from last week where we had the guys from Defense of the Patients on. I'm trying to rotate through our guests. Variable people from the community who might have questions to ask during broadcast or might have insight for you guys. If you have feedback for me on this type of program that is much more sort of oriented at helping people understand concepts in Dota rather than following the game as entertainment or strictly entertainment, go ahead and send me a tweet at GotCowDota. I'd love to hear it. I'm trying to hone in and make sure that this is the best program that it can be. That being said, last thing I guess is if you like CEVO, we do a lot of regular casting content as well. And you can find us doing almost every day of the week casting content between Chicago, Ted, Helium, and myself, along with the occasional visit from Toffees or Ever.
For the invite tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. It was my pleasure to have you guys. You guys can pick up a ticket to increase the prize pools for these teams. By every ticket increases prize pool, and every ticket includes a sweet Juggernaut set as well on Dota TV. Go ahead and hit follow on twitch.tv/playcevo1. And if you subscribe to this channel, you'll get a subscription on every CEVO channel. And CEVO does a whole litany of esports, including CSGO and Dota. We've got 3 active channels running, including 2 Dota channels and 1 CSGO channel. I think they also sometimes cover some of the other esports. So if you want more information on that, check out CEVO.com or go ahead and throw a subscribe our way. All right, that's all I got for you guys. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks for sticking around.
Have a good night.